for the Warriors. Can you believe what you have just seen?
G'day and welcome to the GameDay Squad Rugby League Fantasy Show. I'm Stu, that's Dyl, and we're the Fantasy Bros. We've partnered with GameDay Squad once again to bring you all you need to know to succeed in this season's Rugby League competition. Dyl, welcome, mate. One team preview down, still 4 to go. Who are the clubs in the spotlight tonight?
Yeah, g'day Stu, g'day listeners and viewers as well. Mate, today's teams, we've got the Titans, Seagulls and Storm. So just 3 in tonight's preview. We'll jump back to another 14 preview in the coming weeks as well. We'll go through each of the teams' ins and outs. We'll have a look at some positional and role changes from last season. And then the thing that I'm really keen about, these special competitions, they are brand new. They've just been released onto platform today, the Primetime and in particular the FantasyBros Sunday Showdown, as well as the under-24 players. We're going to have a bit of a deep dive into those as well. Finally, we're going to have some of the must-have players that you need to target this season, or we might steer you away from a couple of players too. I know that there are potentially some traps leading into the beginning of the season. As always, we'll finish the episode with a pack opening competition where the viewers, listeners, you can win some unreal cards. We've already got a diamond Adam Fanua-Blake in there, and there'll be plenty more unreal cards to go in. So make sure you like and subscribe across all of our socials to keep up to date via @FantasyBrosAU. That's on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Apple Music, Spotify, TikTok as well. We've got some reels dropping each and every day. So get around all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll let you know at the end of tonight's show exactly how to get involved in that player pool giveaway. You definitely do not want to miss out on that. Just quietly, how good is the new layout as well? And there's so many competitions to join. I honestly didn't know where to start. I just sat there staring at a blank template and going, what do I do? There are so many new competitions, so many new prizes and cash prizes and pack prizes to be won. It was just all too much. I just had to close the app for a moment, compose myself, and then I went in and built a champion side. But look, yeah, they've just opened up a whole new world of GameDay Squad Rugby League, and fortunately, we've still got 4 weeks ish, maybe a bit less until things kick off. So, gee, I think I'll be giving that app a bit of a workout over the coming days, and everyone else should be giving the app or the website a big workout as well, whether that's tinkering with your own teams or getting some friends involved. You can see there on the screen, those watching, that there is a code that you can type in. For those listening in the audio platforms, make sure you type in the Fantasy Bros special code upon registration. That's FBRL26, FBRL26. And new players, new coaches there will be rewarded with 3 9-player common packs. So a heap of player cards to get some of those squads rolling. And don't forget all of the bronze cards waiting to go for the starter comp as well. There is so much to look forward to over the coming weeks. We've still got plenty of time to get some friends and family involved. So if you're going to do something nice for someone this year, kick it off in the correct fashion and get them signed up to GameDay Squad. Make sure they're using that promo code FBRL26. Right, Dyl, how about we get into the preview from the very first team? You did mention that the Gold Coast Titans would kick things off tonight. You want to let us know how they went last season and what some of their changes for 2026 look like?
Yeah, mate, before I do, though, I'm a little bit disappointed. You said that you built a champion side. I would have thought that you would have gone in, opened the app and gone to the FantasyBros Sunday Showdown, and that would have been the first squad that you would have put together. You would have seen the lovely layout there with the logo and the Trust the Bros on that field. It's an unreal thing that the GameDay Squad boys have done, so keep an eye out for that. Yeah, look, mate, the Gold Coast Titans, pretty horrible season in 2025. We probably need to put a line through that. We kind of expected it, though. 16th on the ladder. They only got the 6 wins and the 18 losses. I think that the big news, though, out of the Titans is some of their big key outs. And the probably names don't get much bigger than the big boy at the top there, David Fifita.
Yep.
He obviously didn't have a big impact in 2025. 2024 and 2023, he was unreal. But yeah, he looks, he's gone across to the Rabbitohs, and that's a big in for the Rabbitohs, but I think it's going to be a huge loss for them. I guess the other key outs is Kieran Foran's retired. AKP's headed over to the Warriors, and I know we're not talking about the Warriors, but it looks like he might be getting a starting spot potentially. He's got had a bit of training there on the wing, so pretty keen to see him. And then Brian Kelly over to the Eels. In terms of a couple of key ends, they've got Max Fine from the Dolphins and then Lachlan Elias as well from the Dragons. The other big loss, I think, it's not necessarily a key on in or out, but it's the injury news of Jamin Jolliffe recently. He looks to be out probably for the season, so that's a bit unfortunate because we know he was a bit of a beast through the middle. No doubt that will bring up a couple of decent players that we might look at as well. Then we've got three key role changes in the side. We've got Keanu Kinney, AJ Brimson, and Cleese Haas. Obviously, that Haas one there at the bottom is potentially a result of the Jamin Jolliffe injury. And do you want to talk through maybe Haas to kick us off with that role change in particular?
Yeah, it's quite interesting, isn't it? The makeup of the forwards there, particularly with Jermaine Jolliffe going down injured, and then of course Tino Fa'asuamaleaui, maybe suggested to move into the front row there, and maybe his role doesn't change too much. Maybe his minutes go down a tick, but we should see a little bit more work through the middle and maybe less ball playing. And maybe that does open up a spot there for Cleese Haas, who's rumoured about getting some time through the middle. Still not certain about their makeup on the edges or that number 13 spot or even the bench for that matter. So I think they're going to be a really exciting look over the next few weeks, particularly when those trials start. But he's certainly someone with plenty of promise. He's definitely got a pretty handy surname, if that means anything. Look, he's someone on the up, and if he's getting plenty of game time, he's not going to break a slate. He's not going to play as well as Payne Haas can, but he's certainly someone that can get through plenty of work and bump off a few tackles. Is he someone that you started to get a little bit warmer on, a little bit more excited about moving forward?
Yeah, a little bit, and mainly for the FantasyBros Sunday Showdown. You can see there that we've got 11 games with the Titans this season on the Sunday, which is the second most. And I think that's where he's going to come into calculation, where we've got a smaller player pool, and we're going to have to look at some of those fringe middles and maybe in edges and maybe pick a couple of players that we wouldn't usually pick. And I think he is definitely the epitome of one of those sort of fringe players who has shown brilliance in the past, but just having that additional minutes on the field, I think is going to do some wonders. And if he can get to 1 point per minute and sort of carve out a role there, I think that's going to be a great option moving forward. The other player that I really love that does have that notable role change is Keanu Kinney. He's going to be available across not just the FantasyBros Sunday Showdown, but also the under-24 competition. Now, there was a bit of discussion around the under-24 competition today. Just to give people an idea, the way that under-24 competition works is that you have your forwards, which is made up of the hookers, edges, and middles, and then you have the backs, which is made up of centers, wingers, and fullbacks. And you can select from any of those eligible players to fill your positions on the side. It doesn't have to be a hooker specifically. It could be all front rowers or all middles if you like as well. So Keanu Kinney becomes probably an absolute must for me in the under-24 competition, but then also potentially in the Sunday Showdown. Is that somewhere where you're thinking as well with Kinney? Obviously, the stats from last season are pretty deceptive. He only averaged 26 in 6 games, but look, a lot of those games were off the bench, and we know that he's a better player than what he showed in 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 games to start the season at fullback. Nothing too flash, averaged low 40s there without a try, just the 1 try assist as well. He then suffered that pretty serious neck injury. Didn't look like he was going to come back at all throughout the season, then played sort of 20-ish minutes off the bench for 3 matches in a row before finishing around 27 with a really nice sort of 50 GDS points, and then had a sensational representative season at the back end of the year as well with New Zealand. So, he looks raring to go. And yeah, it almost seemed like his career was in some sort of doubt as well after that injury was sustained. And the timeline for return to the game seemed to be put off, and they didn't have too much injury news or return to play news for him. It was just all about his welfare and getting him back on track. But no, he looked absolutely electric, and I cannot wait to play him. You did mention, is he going to be a standout in the Sunday Showdown and the under-24 comp? My answer to that is a resounding yes. He might even be a mainstay in the regular normal weekly comp as well. I think he's going to be that good, and there will be weeks where the Titans have a pretty handy matchup on paper. They may not necessarily win the match, but there might be plenty of points scored. He just gets through so much work. He bumps off tackles so easily, and he's got the knack for finding the line or creating some attack as well. So, yeah, those two comps for sure. And I think early on in the season, he could be a pretty handy pod if some of the big weapons aren't firing early on, and we know that he's going to get through plenty of work. So, yeah, absolutely. He's been a favourite of mine ever since he sort of broke out 2 seasons ago. Gee, he just plays with so much confidence. He seems to be so durable when he's on the field, and he just keeps carting the ball up even when the game's long gone. And when the defense is a little bit tired, they just fall off him because he's so small and he's so powerful. He racks up those 3 points pretty quickly in that debut season. 4.1 tackle breaks per match. So there's 12 points per match on top of all the meters that he's running. And I think he had a 300-meter representative game as well. He averaged 212 meters in that 2024 season with a number of 240 plus run meters and a massive 344 in round 24 against the Dragons. That is absolutely electric. Not only is it the run meters, but he's a chance of breaking tackles. Think Brian To'o carting the ball up from fullback, sweeping both sides of the field. He's almost as good.
Yeah, and a couple of those numbers there you touched on from 2024, when he started at fullback last season in 2025, he averaged 212 running meters. He averaged 4 tackle breaks. On top of those, he also had 1 line break per game and 1 try assist per game, which is not something we necessarily attribute to Keanu Kinney in the past, but I really like that game from him as well. And if he can obviously lock down that starting fullback role, I think it's just going to be wheels up for Keanu Kinney. Another player that's really interesting that I think will come into contention across all forms of competitions is Beau Fermor. He obviously has the role locked down on the edge there, but for me, it's always the concern as to whether he moves into the centres. We saw last season, he ended up averaging 52 GDS points for the season. But whenever he moved into the centre and had that starting role in the centre, he only averaged 26 GDS points. So my concern is the moment that we see an injury to any of the outside backs, Fermor jumps across straight away. And obviously, the difference between 26 and 52 is very big, and it could be the difference between winning the Sunday Showdown and not, and it could be the difference between the $5,000 grand prize. So for me, it's for Fermor, it's just a watch and wait, and hopefully we don't see any injuries. But the moment we do, I think he just is off me. I'm off him completely, and he's out of my team. I think that is just where I'm at the moment.
Yeah, he's pretty safe, isn't he? That 30 tackles a game, 120 run meters. He's got a handy knack for finding the try line or setting up a try assist. But you're right, it's sometimes he gets named in the centre jersey, but if there is an injury, just about anyone in the back line, he's the first one that does move. So it might look like a great call early on, named in the in the 12 jersey and looking like he's in for a nice big solid game there in the back row, and then all of a sudden he's catching a cold out there in the centres, and that point accumulation dries up. He's definitely someone that's got a game conducive to game day squad fantasy point scoring. But we don't want to pick those edge back rowers that find themselves out in the centres too frequently. And I think you've nailed it there. He certainly is a guy in that mould. Mate, someone who's played a bit of centre in recent years, hopefully more in the halves again this season. No Kieran Foran there at the Titans this year. Does that mean AJ Brimson now steps up and takes control of this side alongside Jaden Campbell, maybe frees him up a little bit? Or is the loss of Kieran Foran maybe going to be more impactful for these two? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, look, AJ Brimson is actually my pick for the Titans and one of the key players that I think we should be looking at. Yep. But I guess it's one of those things that's really interesting. We often talk about those out of position players where they've got a specific tag in game day squad, but they're playing out of position and it's beneficial. I think if anything, AJ Brimson's fullback tag in game day squad is actually detrimental potentially to an aspect. And I think it's going to be really difficult for players to look outside of a number of fullbacks that we already have options with. And potentially pick AJ Brimson when he is playing in the halves. Look, based on the predicted lineup, as we said, Keanu Kinney is going to play in fullback. Brimo's going to pair with Campbell in the halves, like he did for the first half of 2025, which I think is probably the key there for me. During that time, he averaged 20 tackles, 83 run meters, 165 kicking meters, and 2.5 tackle breaks per game. So that's a base and power GDS average of 41 points, which I think is a perfect platform, a perfect floor for a half to be able to go on and potentially get a decent result in terms of 80 to 100 points when you add in the potential of try assists or any other attacking type stats as well. It's 5 more points, GDS points, compared to Brimson's time at fullback last season. So he was able to outscore himself when he was playing in the halves compared to fullback. However, the key stat for me, the difference is in try scoring. At fullback, Brimo only got over the line 3 times. However, in the halves, he crossed over the line 7 times. So it's clear he really benefits from getting his hands on the ball a lot more, having those opportunities with time and space to be able to make some decisions, whether that's breaking the line, whether that's putting in a short ball or whatever that looks like. I think that's important for Brimson to have that time and space with ball in hand compared to when he's playing at fullback and he sort of sweeps around. He might be the dummy play. He might not look for the option that time, so he might not have his hands on the ball as much. And it's something similar to what Reece Walsh was doing at the back end of last season. He was getting his hands on the ball at first receiver, and we saw what happened to Reece Walsh's game. And I think if AJ Brimson can have that and lock down that role, I think it's going to be really key. That the question mark is obviously going to be, are you going to play the fullback AJ Brimson when he's playing out of position in the halves, compared to someone like James Tedesco, compared to someone like that man that I just mentioned, Reece Walsh? I mean, there's a plenty of options. There's a plethora of fullbacks, and it's just going to be, can we make that decision? Maybe it's just going to be matchup based, or maybe it's going to be a Sunday Showdown mainstay in AJ Brimson for me.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it there with the Sunday Showdown. In a full slate where we've got all of those gun fullbacks to choose from, you and I normally go the safe route. We want to go, the Teddies that get through plenty of base and power, but certainly have that try-scoring upside as well. AJ Brimson probably doesn't have that at the moment, particularly with the changes going on at the Titans, as well as, a bit of a change to the forward pack too. And they could be, finding it more difficult to get the ball down the field. And that obviously means it's harder for Brimson and Campbell and Kinney to get involved as well. So that's something that could be a bit of a red flag too. Sunday Showdown, where we don't have too many options to choose from, we'll probably want to pick a few guys with plenty of upside. And like we've mentioned a few times already, when the Titans are on and they're scoring points, they still might not win the game. They can score 30 and lose. But when they're scoring, 26, 34 points, it's Campbell, it's Brimson, it's Kinney that are, the chief destroyers and the guys that are going 60, 70, 80 plus GDS points. So definitely pencil AJ Brimson in for a Sunday Showdown at least.
Definitely. Mate, you're looking at Tino Fa'asuamaleaui as your key player for the season.
Yeah, absolutely. We sort of touched on him a little bit earlier with the news of Jermaine Jolliffe's injury. And if anyone looked at Tino's stats from last season, they'd probably be a little bit underwhelmed. An average of just 48 sort of undersells the true upside that he does have. But I think that sort of comes down to some inconsistent minutes throughout the middle period of the season rather than a lack of production. He averaged 54 minutes for the season, but he played games above 60 minutes on 10 occasions for big 55 and 60 plus point hauls, which is what you want. So if you know that Tino Fa'asuamaleaui is going to be on the field getting that 60 minutes, then he can rival some of the big guns that you put in your middle forward position. But too frequently, we saw those minutes dip to 54 or below. And in games under 60 minutes, his average minutes were just 43. Although that did include 2 reduced minute games from the bench during the Origin period, where we probably wouldn't be tempted to play him anyway. So the beauty of GameDay Squad obviously is that we can clear that team each round. And he probably wouldn't come into calculation. So that 48 average probably doesn't reflect of what he was actually scoring for our teams. We were probably playing him in some of those select matches where he wasn't carrying any injuries. He didn't have an Origin match 3 or 4 nights earlier. So he's probably averaging closer to actually 60 for our teams. Just the stats don't really reflect that. So if you can get beyond that sort of psychological little bit of a red flag, maybe, I think he's a great option. And I think a lot of coaches are going to look past him as well. In those 10 games over 60 minutes, 36 tackles per game, 157 run meters. Those base stats are comparable to Payne Haas. Tackle break and offload numbers aren't as high, obviously, but it just shows he can put up some pretty big scores as long as we can see him on the park for enough time. However, we speak about it all the time in the live preview shows for him and a couple of other players. It's his negatives that really hurt his GDS scores when they stack up more missed tackles than tackle breaks and 0.7 errors per game. He's just going backwards a little bit too frequently than you'd like. We did hear the news about Jermaine Jolliffe not too long ago at time of recording. That obviously does open up, a couple of key areas for him: time on field, workload, responsibility as skipper. So I think they're all positives for a Tino perspective in terms of spending some more time on the park and sort of being that mentor and that leader to some of the younger players around him. We saw last season in the first half, he'd play 30 minutes and then go off for 4 or 6 minutes and then come back on for a little stint. Yeah. If we see that and then him playing the full second half, that'll be absolute music to our ears. And he won't be a consideration for a Sunday Showdown only. He comes into consideration for a full round. But for me, Fantasy Bros Sunday Showdown, definite lock to start with. If he becomes that 60-minute middle player, sign me up long term. I think he's going to be in for a big year, just not around Origin.
Yeah, you just have to go back to the first game that the Titans played, round 2 of the 2025 season, up against the Bulldogs. Tino had 54 minutes on the park, and he finished with a points per minute of 1.4. So ended up scoring 75 GDS points. And as you said, he did one of those things where he had 4 or 6 minutes on the bench and ran straight back out. And I don't even know what the point is. But if we can get something like that again with Tino, I think he's just going to be one of those players that we lock in each and every week alongside the Haases and the Yos, etc. of the world. The interesting thing is going to be Chris Randall looks to have probably gone to lock for the Titans with a potential of a young gun, Josh Paxton, finding his way onto one of the edges potentially. It's not confirmed yet, but it'll be interesting to see how they go along with Chris Randall, whether he does play some big minutes as well, or whether they might cycle Tino back to that lock role where he has had a lot of success in the past. And if that's the case, if he does play through the middle in 2 different positions, I think that just boosts his numbers even more and potentially could mean he has that 60-plus minute role, as you say. And, through the middle, whether it is up the front or at that lock role, I think it's going to be really nice for Tino. And the other thing, he doesn't mind getting over the try line as well. I know a couple of times last season he crossed the line and we're all fist pumping because we played him. The one downside is he did have that one game for only 7.4 GDS points. So we've just got to keep an eye out for potentially when that might be coming and hopefully avoid him there.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a lot to watch in the trials for the makeup of that Titans forward pack. Right, Dyl, that brings us to the end of the Gold Coast Titans preview. Anyone listening have any other questions about any other Gold Coast Titans players, pop them in the YouTube comment section and we'll jump on there and reply with our thoughts about how we think they might go in season 2026. But hopefully, giving you a little bit of insight to a heap of players that you can use all season long, particularly on a Sunday or in that under 24 comp. Right, Dyl, let's move on to the Manly Sea Eagles. You want to run us through how they went last season and what some of their changes for season 2026 look like?
Yeah, Manly Sea Eagles, interesting one. Last season, finished 10th. They actually had 12 wins, 12 losses. And there were times where they would look absolutely unstoppable. And then other times where they couldn't even beat the Warriors when the Warriors were floundering through the middle of the season. So, yeah, it was a really interesting season for the Manly Sea Eagles. I think that the big in is Jamal Fogarty there from the Raiders. I think that's going to be a massive in. Obviously, he replaces the big loss of DCE, who's moved on to the Roosters. But I think Jamal Fogarty there is going to make a massive difference in terms of his kicking game, which we've spoken around at length. The one notable role change that I really like and I'm really keen to talk about a little bit later is Jake Simpkin. Obviously, there's a couple of other key ins and outs that we're not really needing to discuss around the GDS perspective. But as a result, Jake Simpkin has really found a home, I think, as an 80-minute hooker. And I'm going to spend a bit of time talking about him a little bit later on. But jumping across to our under 24 players, eligible players, is there anyone there that jumps out at you that you are really keen on to start with the Manly Sea Eagles?
Yeah, we've got Kula and Lehigh Hopewade, both players that probably found a spot in my side at times throughout last season, particularly during that origin period as well, when Hopewade is on that left wing with Turbo feeding him the ball from fullback, generally pretty fortuitous in terms of his likelihood of finding the try line. You just don't want him chasing through a grubber and knocking himself out and missing the remainder of the match after scoring a try. That one definitely hurt. But if Tommy's not playing, Tommy's not playing through injury, which is definitely something that could happen, or, even Origin, then we sometimes see Lehigh Hopewade move to fullback. And he just is such an absolute beast playing fullback, not in the same mold as Tom Turbo, but he gets through the workload. He loves to carry the footy, can break a tackle, and he's also pretty creative as well. He's quite deceptive with the way that he runs, and he can palm off a few tackles and put some blokes in space as well. So even when he's on the wing, still a pretty handy play in a smaller slate if Tommy Turbo's there, feeding him plenty of ball down that left. But then when Tommy Turbo's not there, Lehigh Hopewade becomes a really interesting play. If you can play him on the wing, but he's playing fullback for his club, and that's got plenty of upside. We know Cooler as well, plenty of speed. He's had some massive performances. It's just so hard to pick those performances when he does go off. Ruben Garrick, obviously, on the right-hand side, Cooler there on the left. If Manly's shifting their attack to the left a little bit more with no Cherry Evans, obviously Fogarty's going to do a lot of controlling, but we saw a lot of the success at the Raiders down that left-hand side, through Strange and Hudson Young. Wouldn't surprise me to see plenty of organisation and control down the right and a lot of the creativity down the left. And that's where blokes like Cooler, Hopewade, and Tommy Turbo are going to thrive. Similar thoughts, mate?
Yeah, firstly, I guess the first thing that we didn't really ask is, mate, how do you feel seeing Jamal Fogarty in the maroon and white now and compared to the lime green of the milk?
It just doesn't feel right at the moment. I haven't, obviously I see his legend card. I wake up every morning and open up my GameDay spot app and have a look at the legend card. It's just not the same anymore. It's got the really weird Manly colours with his name. It just hasn't quite sunk in yet. It'll be even worse when I see him run out of the sheds in that Manly jersey. But once that happens, it's probably going to be Jamal Hu for me.
Yeah. Look, if you need a hand, I can take that legend off you just so you don't have to look at it anymore as well. So you just get into it a little bit later. Yeah, look, no, I 100% agree. Lehigh Hopewade is probably the standout there for me, and especially if Tommy Turbo does go down with an injury or potentially he plays that well, he couldn't find his way into Origin. Tommy Turbo is actually the interesting one for me. We can see there that across the primetime slate, there's 8 games on the Thursday, Friday for Manly Sea Eagles. They also feature 7 times in the FantasyBros Sunday Showdown. So there's going to be plenty of opportunity in a smaller slate. Tommy Turbo is going to be one of those players that we definitely look at. In 2025, he averaged 43 GDS points, which is very low. And I think the key result for me, or the key reason for that result, is he only had 6 tries in 18 games. That's well down on 2024. He scored 17 tries in 18 games in 2024. So look, and even in 2023, he had an injury-impacted season like most times he does, but he scored 10 tries in 11 games there. So that try-scoring record from 2025, surely we have to see some positive regression there. Surely we have to see some greater input in the try-scoring column from Tom Trbojevic, in which case I think he's going to be a play. It'll be hard most weeks not to play him when we've got a smaller slate, when we do only have the 3 or 4 teams potentially, the 3 or 4 games, the 2 games potentially on a Sunday as well, where we might only have sort of 4 or 5 fullback options that we really like. And I think Tom Trbojevic is going to be one of those ones that we're picking him on name base alone, potentially over anything else that he's displayed from the last season, because that average there of 43 is not great viewing, and 6 tries is not what we want from someone that scored 17 the season before. So look, maybe it's a blessing in disguise if he, and we don't want anyone to be injured at all, but if he does go down injured and it does give way for Lehigh Hopewade to come through and have that fullback role, maybe that is a blessing in disguise for a lot of GDS coaches, where we won't have to make that turbo decision or not, and we can just run with Lehigh Hopewade each and every week.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you've teased Jake Simpkin. We've both teased Tommy Turbo. They're both of our Manly Seagulls picks. We'll jump into them in a moment. Just want your thoughts very quickly on another man that people will be quite interested to play, particularly on those shortened slates. Haumole Olakau'atu had a few injuries, had a down season, averaged below 50. No Daly Cherry Evans there on his inside. We've seen seasons gone past where that combination was just insane, and Cherry would use him super early and say, here you go, Haumole, you do the rest, and he'd bump over 2 or 3 blokes. if he didn't score, he'd offload to someone who did. We just didn't see enough of that consistently last year. Is that a good thing? Cherry Evans moves on and he now has a different halves partner. And so how do you see that playing out? And do you see him being a regular starter in our sides?
Yeah, to answer that second question, I don't think he's going to be a regular starter. We sort of saw glimpses of Olakau'atu go missing in games, a bit like I think what David Fafita did at times, where he would sort of hide behind the ball and he never got involved, and it really limited his opportunity to score. And look, he did come out in certain games and have absolute blinders where, like you said, he got that short ball off Cherry Evans and broke through about 3 or 4 tackles and then got over the line. But I think a lot of teams sort of started to work it out as well. They seemed to jam in on him quite well and really wrap up the ball, and he was getting tackled at the line sort of 3 or 4 times across a couple of sets and never quite getting over the line. And we're all sitting there just hoping that he got over the line to get that try and just never quite did. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a big loss for Olakau'atu with Cherry Evans gone. And I think for me anyway, it's going to be a sit and wait and watch to see how that does play out. But I think to start with, for the start of the season, I think I'm going to just steer clear of him at the moment. He's one of those players that I think I'm going to fade, even in the prime time and FantasyBros Showdown, Sunday Showdown, if I've got other options as well. If sort of there's no other options of that sort of second tier of forwards and in particular edge back rowers, then yeah, maybe Olakau'atu gets a look in. But if I've got plenty of options, then I think he can be an easy fade for me this season, just based on that role that he might or might not have.
Yeah, spot on. I think that combination, Fogarty, Olakau'atu, and then Garrick there on the right-hand side, both had down years last year. We'll have to see if that has any chance of improving before they get a look into our sides. But mate, you mentioned you had a bit to say about Jakey Simpkin. He's someone that I'm pretty tempted by. Can you talk me into looking for a few more of his cards on the transfer market?
Yeah, I think, and look, I might be eating my words come halfway through the season, but I think he could be one of the best hooker options that we have this season. Wow. He could be similar to, I think, what Blake Brayley was last season, where he sort of came out of the clouds and just took over it as that number one hooker. I think Jake Simpkin really has that opportunity. He probably could have been, as you said, you were sort of thinking about him. He probably could have been a pod before I said his name. And you know, I could have easily just kept it to myself and kept some of these stats that really point to him having a big season to myself. But look, that's not what we do here. And I think he still potentially could be a pod because we haven't seen it at full force yet. We don't know exactly what that makeup of the squad's going to look like. But a lot of coaches are still going to turn to that Blake Brayley, that Harry Grant as the 2 key hooker options, and sprinkled in with a few other options here and there, the Wade Egan's, etc. But I think if we can get Jake into that number 9 jersey long-term for the Sea Eagles, as I mentioned previously, I think that's going to go a long way. There's obviously a number of key personnel changes at the club where he will find his way into that 9 start. We think he'll be starting. Whether he remains on the field for 80 minutes, we're not sure yet. If it all goes well, though, he really could be that 80-minute hooker that we need with some upside. In 2025, he had 8 opportunities starting at hooker at pretty much the back end of the season. He had 5 of those at the back and a few of those appearances sprinkled throughout. The 5 at the back end of the season were all 80-minute performances. So we have seen the 80-minute games from him previously. During the 8 appearances at hooker across the season, Simpkin amassed a GDS average of 57.7 GDS points, which is far and above his 29.3 that he gained when he was coming off the bench. So he is a much better option if we know that he's starting and he's going to play big minutes. That average of 57.7 would have had him ranked first for hookers in 2025. That's 5 points better than what Blake Brayley got, who topped the averages for 2025. So Simpkin is definitely one of those players that I'm going to keep an eye on. If we get any sniff of him starting in the hooker role and playing upwards of 60 minutes, getting to that 80-minute role that we've seen in the past, I think I'm going to have to change some rankings, and I think he could be one of the best hookers in the competition.
Yeah, I think he can be close to 80 minutes. The big question mark, obviously, is, well, look, they've got Zach Docker-Clay in the squad. He hasn't, really shown too much at a couple of different clubs he's been to. He's serviceable, but probably not suitable for any sort of decent minutes in the NRL at the moment. Look, he could come out and have a really nice couple of trials and impress the coach and fight for a number 14 spot. But at the moment, I think Manly want to do anything they can to get Joey Walsh into that top grade side, and then to stay in rugby league as well. Obviously, very talented rugby union player, played fly half for the Australian schoolboy side. So, there's a bit of pressure there on the opposite code to get him across. And Manly don't want to miss out on his talents. But look, with Brooksy and Jamal Fogarty in the halves, Joey Walsh is a natural half. He's still only 18 years of age. So I don't know how they're going to inject him and whether a hooker is the right idea. Making him, even if it's only 20 minutes, still forcing him to make all those extra tackles through the middle against those bigger forwards could be fairly detrimental. It could be awesome to see him come on maybe after 30, just play a bit of a roaming sort of lock roll and not have to tackle too much, maybe shift one or two wider from the ruck, and just be creative with the ball for maybe 10 minutes in the first half and 20 or 25 in the second half, or something like that they're going to do something to get him involved if he is in the 14 jersey. Just don't really see it at hooker. And if that is the case, then that just makes your case for Jake Simpkin even better. And he's definitely capable of going 80 minutes. If he's going 80 minutes and told, look, just tackle, he's a bit of a tackle bot. He can get through plenty of tackles. And he's pretty smart at sniffing out a small opportunity, taking on a slow marker or diving over close to the try line as well. So, pretty reliable in the tackle department. And I think the minutes could be pretty handy if we see Joey Walsh in the 14. I'm just not sure how they're going to use him. Any thoughts or similar thinking there?
Yeah, pretty much the same thinking as you. And we, at the moment, we have sort of got Joey Walsh, as you said, in that 14 role and potentially coming on and just playing a relieving role of any kind, really, through the middle. There potentially is a bit of injury support as well if needed in the halves, and or potentially at fullback or wherever the utility might take him in terms of that injury. So I think there's plenty of options for Joey Walsh. I'm just not sure with the number of players that they've got what that makeup's going to look like, and obviously it's difficult to know that until we see some form of pre-season trial, and even then we might not get the clear answers, because they usually roll out about 30 blokes and has a game. It's a bit like under 12s, everyone gets an opportunity to play, but I think if we could see as much as possible of Simpkin and Joey Walsh as well coming off the bench, I think that's just going to be helpful for even our under 24 competition as well, potentially. If Joey Walsh does excite and he does start getting more minutes, I think that's going to be a real key as well for the under 24 comp.
Oh yeah, let's hope we see both of them on the field at the same time during the trial. That will certainly answer a few prayers. Right, mate, you spoke a little bit about Tommy Trbojevic, only the 6 tries last season, and quite surprisingly, just scored tries in 4 games, had 2 doubles. So his 6 tries are only scored across 4 games as well. He went so many matches without finding the try line. And he had a couple of try assists, 1 try assist every 2 games, but still on his standard is definitely nothing to write home about. And look, nor is a 43-point average, but it's not woeful. And we're probably not playing Tommy Turbo every match anyway. We're going to look to target him against, some really fortuitous matches where a lot of points are on the table, where we think Manly are at home, the sun's shining, and they could score 40 or 50 points, and he'd be amongst those. So, look, I think that average again of 43, not amazing, but look, it reflects a lot of volatility. But his run meters, try involvement, his support play, all of that create clear slate winning outcomes when Manly roll downfield and when they're on top. So he might not be someone I look to play early. He might be someone I look at matchup only. He's going to have that massive game at some point. I just don't want to miss it, because you're just going to be tempted to roll him out the next weekend, and he's definitely not going to repeat that performance. Look, I'm not too sure about how they're going to go losing Cherry Evans and what sort of response that's going to instill in Tommy Turbo. I do feel like replacing Cherry Evans with Jamal Fogarty could be pretty handy for Tom Turbo. The reason I say that is, look, we know that Fogarty was instrumental in Canberra's success last season. In fact, a lot of, well-recognised pundits and tipsters sort of had the Raiders in the bottom 4, but they were outstanding, weren't they? And there was a reason that they were the minor premiers. They didn't fall off at the back end. They stayed strong and got that minor premiership and had the Broncos for about 88 minutes of that 90-minute golden point match before just absolutely bringing nothing to Cronulla the following week. But look, I think Fogarty is going to get Turbo involved a little bit more than Cherry Evans did. We know that Cherry Evans likes to run a lot himself. We know he likes to throw that big dummy and then a short ball to Olakuatu. We know he likes to sweep from the left to the right and get the ball in his hands and show and go. Fogarty doesn't really play that type of game. He doesn't like to get tackled too much. And he plays a bit more of a distributing role. And KO Weeks was a really big breakout for the Raiders last season. And a lot of that was because of just the good clean ball that he was getting as a result of the forwards getting downfield nice and quickly, but then Fogarty making sure that the danger men got the ball in the right positions as well. So Fogarty's going to know just how good Tom Turbo is, and he's going to make sure he uses him as much as he possibly can. So look, I think, I'm really excited to see the upside that Turbo brings. I think when we pick our GDS lineups, we should treat him as a bit more of that selective weapon rather than a weekly lock. So when the matches open up, look, his ceiling is going to be one of the highest in the comp. I'm sure we'll see him get back to 80 and 90-point scores at some point this season. And if he does, we don't want to miss out on that breakout score. So if there's a tempting matchup on a Sunday Arvo and the options aren't quite there, I'm going to back Jamal in to repay me at least once and get a big score for Tommy Trbojevic.
Yeah, the other thing I think I really liked from Turbo last year is that we started to see him sweeping both sides of the field, which we hadn't seen for a while. So it meant that he had more opportunity to be able to get the ball in his hands. Obviously, he didn't necessarily turn that into massive amount of points from a GDS average perspective, but there were games where he did have plus 60 GDS points and, obviously treated that matchup quite nicely. And as a result, the coaches were rewarded with that. So I think it's going to be, as you say, really selective. But if he can continue sweeping both sides of the field and just give himself as much opportunity, as you say, hopefully that connection with Jamal Fogarty is a good one, and they've got some chemistry straight up so that we can get Turbo into our sides as soon as possible. He did have the one big game of 86 GDS points against the Dolphins last season. So as we said, that was a pretty good matchup that we like to target across the season as well against the Dolphins. So an 86 GDS points against them is a really good outing. And as you say, it's one of the best ceilings for sure in the competition. It's going to be really hard to leave him out of your side if he's got a good matchup, if it's on a Sunday afternoon and it's at 4 Pines where they love to put on a big score for the Manly crowd over there.
Oh, cannot wait. Righto, mate. Let's move on to the third and final team of the show. And it's Melbourne Storm. Run us through how they went last season. And I know this might be a pretty tough or a sore spot for you, but let us know their key ins and outs, would you?
Yeah. So the Storm had an unreal season last year, obviously made it to the grand final and just missed out by only a couple of points. And they had a really good outing. 17 wins, 7 losses for the season. Not a lot of key ins. I guess the one key in, if you want to call it that, is Jack Hetherington. He probably doesn't come into contention too much for GDS, but we had to put something there. It's the key outs, though, that as Stewie touched on, is kind of a sore spot for me. Grant Anderson obviously moves over to the Broncos, which, it's a bit of a loss for the Storm. They used him quite nicely throughout the season, and it'll be interesting to see how they go in filling that role. Jonah Pezzett has moved on to the Eels for a season, then heading to the Broncos from 2027. So it's really interesting to see how he goes this season as well and what they do to fill that that third half spot that he was filling at the time. The big one, obviously, is Ryan Pappenhausen. We didn't know what he was doing. He was released by the Storm, obviously was looking to chase that Rugby 360 money. That hasn't really eventuated. He's now come out and said that he is retired. And he stated that the multiple concussions and head knocks that he received and his inability to be able to overcome some of those was part of the reason. And it's a sad day to see someone as good as Ryan Pappenhausen leave the sport, but we understand obviously your health and your mental health and your physical health is more important than a game of rugby league, and it's more important than a prize card that you win in 2025 that can never be used. But I digress. We're not going to talk about that any further. The big thing then for us, though, for GDS coaches is the notable role change because of Ryan Pappenhausen leaving, and that is the young man in Suafa-Longo. Do you want to touch on how good the matchup, the role, and the season that Sue is going to have for the Melbourne Storm?
Yeah, look, to be honest, I'm slightly cooling on that. Look, there's no denying his talent. He's a freak, and a full preseason sort of knowing his role, and the Storm sort of knowing that they would be without Ryan Pappenhausen for a big part of that preseason would definitely go a long, long way to his development. I don't know. I just don't see him yet as that upper echelon fullback that can make or break a game day squad slate. In saying that, the fact that we can play him in the wing definitely makes things a lot easier. Look, to be honest, if he was an out-and-out fullback, I don't think we'd be having much of a conversation about him. I think he'd be, buried amongst some of the other, okay fullbacks in the competition. I just see his size being something that really impacts his ability to break a game wide open, to bump off a few blokes. Yeah, he's obviously getting older, putting on some weight and developing that side of the game. Just probably haven't seen it enough yet, and that's why I am hesitant. I'm not just going to flock to him immediately because I want to see a little bit from him first. He's played a couple of games at fullback for the Storm over the last few seasons. They've been good, but they haven't been amazing. He hasn't really had that one huge breakout sort of 80, 90-point GDS equivalent game. I'm not saying that he can't hit those heights this season. Just want to see a little bit from him first. Obviously can score tries. His speed is pretty good. His run meters are okay. I just think his size is going to be a little bit against him this season, and the opposition team are going to know that they don't have to match up against Ryan Pappenhausen, who's, not only one of the best fullbacks in the game, but deceptively quick and deceptively good for his size. They need to aim up on Sewer. If they can knock him over once or twice and get in under his skin a little bit or ruin that confidence, he could go missing for periods. And that's, no surprise for a young player in the game of rugby league. So I think the opposition team are really going to aim up on him. If they can get him out of the game, then there's, Jerome Hughes, Cameron Munster, Harry Grant, all very, very good names, and they'll find ways to get Sewer into the game. I just don't think he's that much of a slam dunk pick. Obviously, more than happy to eat my words by season's end. Just calling on him a fraction, and I want to see it first, really.
Yeah, I guess the way I look at it is we've got someone similar, albeit I think Jai Gray is probably just that little bit bigger, but he's got a similar build to Sewer as well, and we've seen how destructive Jai Gray can be and how good he can be at the back there. So I think you're right. If Sewer Furlongo could get a little bit more weight on him, the speed is what gets me. And I think it was a couple of seasons ago, he came off the bench against the Broncos and absolutely torched them.
Yeah.
So if we can see something like that again, I think that is going to be just an elite play. As you say, he's out of position for GDS. He's got the player tag in GDS as the winger, but he's playing in the fullback role, which we do love. There's plenty of upside there. 2024, he played 7 games at fullback. He didn't actually start any games in 2025 at fullback, but in that 2024, he averaged 35 in base and power, and then he had 1 line break per game and 1 try assist every 2 games. So I think probably around that 50 to 60 mark is probably where we might expect him to be. And then any other attacking stats on top of that, I think is going to be pretty juicy. But yeah, sort of around that 50 mark, I think at least to begin with is probably something that we're looking at. And it might be that we do roll them out in the under 24 competition, or maybe the prime time. The Melbourne Storm have 12 primetime games in 2026. So that's something definitely to look at. They've only got the 3 games in the FantasyBros Sunday Showdown, so they probably won't be as relevant on the Sunday, Monday games, but definitely that primetime Thursday, Friday. Obviously, primetime, they've got some of the best teams in the competition playing on those days. And then, as I said, the under 24 as well. Another player that's really interesting that, we've got no confirmation yet, but with Eli Katoa out for the season, not yet retired medically or anything like that, but he has said that he will not play this season. Someone that could come into contention is Lasati, who I think he might find his way into that role on the right side. I know we've got a few others in people like Joe Chan, etc., that have played, and have had some success on the edge. But I think Lasardi could be that player that might move there. And the key for me is potentially going to be playing outside Jerome Hughes, which I think, that was the benefit for Ali Katoa and why he had so much success as well. Lasardi played most of his last season off the bench. He did get 2 games starting, one at lock and one at the second row. Neither were grandstand performances, but I think given that time and if he is training at that edge role and he's getting that relationship with a number of players, I think he could be a really good option as well when we need in that smaller slate, when we don't have as many options potentially depending on the matchup. So that's just someone to keep an eye on as well, I think, when we go into the preseason to see where Artie Lasardi ends up and what that sort of role for him is.
Yeah, not someone, massively spring to mind as someone that you want to start, but definitely during the origin period, if you're looking to get a few Storm players into your team with an easy matchup, that ball's going to be going right to Jerome Hughes every single attacking play. And Lasardi just needs to be able to run a half-decent line, and Hughes will find a way to get him across. And when we want to play our back rowers, it's the guys that get through plenty of work, that don't need to rely on tries, that we love playing. But those that get through plenty of work and can find the try line, they're just absolutely gold in that edge position. So if he can find a nice little partnership there with Jerome Hughes, there'll certainly be some matches that we can take advantage of that. Anyone that you want to talk about specifically, mate, before we move into some of our key hopes from the Storm?
Look, I know that you are technically hosting, but I just want to throw a question at you. Just really quickly, simple yes or no if you like, it's up to you. Is Harry Grant still a genuine option across a full slate, across a full round of competitions, or is he going to become someone that we just look at for a primetime competition?
Short answer, one-word answer is yes. He will be an option in a full round. There's no indication to tell us that he's not the player that he once was. Yeah, he has had a down year. Hooker position itself is pretty ordinary. He's still capable of having that massive game every now and then. And look, he's the heart and soul of that Melbourne Storm team just about week in, week out. If they're down, then he's he's going to make sure that he can dig them out of a hole. And he had a pretty decent back end of the season as well. His first half of the year, pretty poor. He bounced back in a pretty decent way in the second half of the season as well, when things became more important and finals were on the horizon. Not a weekly play by any means, but if there's a small Sunday slate or a small primetime slate where Brayley or Simpkin and the likes aren't on the primetime, I think he'll be heavily owned in a pretty bad position.
Yeah, I tend to agree that the one thing I think we should put is, in terms of an asterisk next to Harry Grant, is that he will miss tackles. That is one thing he does do. He does love falling off a tackle. You lose 3 points for every missed tackle that your player makes in game day squad. He currently, last season, he averaged 4 missed tackles per game. So that's 12 points that you are losing with Harry Grant each and every game. So as long as that's the case and you're not disappointed come end of the game when he has finished with his less than 50, but he could have been on a 60 plus score, that's the reason. So if you go into that game with that in your mind, then I think that's fine.
Right, mate. No Ryan Pappenhausen. How does that impact Cam Munster? He's your player to watch. Talk to us about Cam.
Mate, you keep digging it in. Hey, Ryan Pappenhausen, he's gone. I keep looking at his price card as well, just hoping that some miracle he comes back. Anyway, look, Cameron Munster, he's really interesting, I think. Yeah, he's really interesting. He had a pretty good season, and I currently actually have him in my top 10 halves with his partner in crime, Jerome Hughes, actually just outside my top 10 at the moment. Doesn't mean that won't change, but I just think Cameron Munster might be that player that just has a little bit more creative. Well, we know that he has a little bit more creativity. We know he plays a little bit more off the cuff. And I think that could be a little bit more rewarding for coaches. There's going to be some games where he does have his below average game, but I think on more occasions than not, we're going to see some absolute brilliance from Cameron Munster. And I think potentially it's a pod. I don't know. I sort of feel when I look at the two halves together from the Storm in Munster and Hughes, I kind of feel a lot of coaches lean towards Hughes. He's got probably the safer play. He's got the definite run game and then, as you say, that short ball. But I'm just really interested to see how that impacts Hughes now that Katoa is not there, and he doesn't have that's absolute elite edge back rower running outside of him. So I sort of feel like Munster might take over a little bit more maybe. But look, all of the stats for me from 2025 sort of suggest that Munster will continue that sort of role that he has. And if it's repeated from last season, I think he will be the one that ends up on top of the averages like he did in 2025. You'd be surprised to learn that it's in fact Munster found greater success when Hughes was on the field. We know that Hughes had that sort of time away from the field with some injury, as did Munster as well. But when they were together, Munster actually performed better. Munster averaged more tackles, similar tackle breaks and running meters, but it was the kicking game that was down. But that makes sense. Jerome Hughes has a lot, to say in the kicking game, so that makes sense for Munster. But it was the big stat that I think was the difference was the try assists. When Munster and Hughes were playing together, Munster averaged 1.1 try assists per game. When Hughes was on the sideline, Munster took a step back from assisting tries. He only was able to assist 0.7 per game. So it's quite a big difference in that Munster's ability. And in fact, Munster ended up having the second most try assists for halves with 21, just behind Izzy Katoa with 23. So look, if Money can continue sort of that run meters, the tackle breaks, the tackles that we know he has in him anyway, particularly with his running game that he has, he can break tackles standing still, turning on a dime. We just see that so often where he is running one way, all of a sudden he completely stops, turns and runs the other way, and there's 2 broken tackles that he's made in that one motion. I think if he can keep that, if those try assists stay, or even if we see some positive regression, maybe even in the try scoring department from Cameron Munster as well, which we've seen in the past, I think there's going to be a big season ahead for Munster. And I don't think the loss of Pappenhausen is going to impact that too much. Looking at the stats, Munster never really had an impacted game when Pappenhausen wasn't there. Not that Pappenhausen wasn't there very often, but last season. But it's just something to consider that I don't think it's going to impact him too much. And in fact, I feel like if Hughes and Munster can be on the field together at the same time, then that's going to make the big difference more so than someone not being on the field.
Yeah, definitely a tough one. I just had a look at some numbers when Pappenhausen didn't play with Cam Munster. Just the 5 matches in the previous 2 seasons. The alarming thing is just the 3 try assists, 1 line break assist, 1 line break and 3 line break assists. Those numbers aren't amazing because you don't have that man, Ryan Pappenhausen with that extra little bit of speed. That sort of frees Munster up or holds some defenders off Munster and allows him to go through. You can see it, working both ways, both positive and negative. He hasn't had that massive game when Pappenhausen hasn't been there, although it's a small sample size. He hasn't been poor, but he's certainly had those bigger matches when he's had the full group of players alongside him that we know and love from the Melbourne Storm. So, yeah, look, I think it's just going to be a teething type issue. I think they're going to take a while to get Sewer into the game. They're probably going to, Harry, Cam and Jerome Hughes are going to be saying, a little bit more rest on us now. So, they're going to have to roll their sleeves up and we're going to see a little bit more from Munster. It's sort of really easy to, throw a ball out the back to Pappy and say, here, you do your thing. They might second guess that and have something up their sleeves and go themselves rather than relying in, super young, albeit really talented speedster. Definitely no Ryan Pappenhausen. So, yeah, look, could work either way. There's definitely plenty of good halves to slot in there at least early on, and he's going to have some big matches throughout the season as well. Can you pick him? I swear, whenever I want to play a Munster and I think he's a bit of a pod and the matchup looks like it's pretty sweet, he just sits back, does nothing. They still coast to a 40-point win, but he's barely got a dirty jersey and he doesn't even need a shower after the match. It's so frustrating. That's my relationship, I think, with Cam Munster at the moment. So you can have the heartbreak for now, and I'll join you if he's looking electric and he becomes a must play, I think.
Yeah, just one more thing on Cam Munster. We go back to that Origin game, middle of the season there. Obviously, a lot happened in his life, and he was able to stand up and really put on one of his best performances, I think, of the season. And so I think we know that Cam Munster can respond to adversity. And if that's the case for the Storm leading into the season, which I'd say by all reports they probably do feel under the pump quite a bit, losing some really key players. I think that Cam Munster is going to be one of those players that stands up because we've seen it before. So, yeah, I'm still keen on him, but I agree. It's going to be a pick your battles and make sure that you get that matchup data right and make sure that there's a good positive matchup there for Cam Munster in particular.
Mate, someone I'm pretty tempted by is the big forward Stefano. Big Utoya Kamanu over from the West Tigers, had a pretty slow start to the season. A lot of, eyebrows were raised when he made the New South Wales Blues side, and he didn't really do too much in that arena to warrant his selection. And I think a lot of people were sort of questioning why a number of other props weren't chosen ahead of him. But the reason why I'm talking about him in tonight's show is he showed a lot of upside toward the back end of the season. And the GDS stats and other stat websites don't show a lot of what he actually did, because a lot of what he did a lot of the damage in the finals. He had a couple of pretty big games toward the back end of the season, buried around some pretty mediocre or average games, but it just reminded us all that he is capable of going big. He doesn't need huge minutes for that to happen either. He can still get that mid 50 minutes and still score a massive 70 or 80 point GDS haul. And he did it a few times in the back end of last season. His average overall was just 45. So it shows how poor he was at the start of the season. But he showed a real breakout toward the back end of the year where he pumped out some pretty big 60 plus scores. Not really due to an increase in minutes, but just more carries and a lot more tackle breaks. He had a number of matches where he had over 6 tackle breaks. He even got 10 in one match against the Eels, and then he topped 10 in one of the finals matches as well, which isn't recorded in the stat center. So he's definitely capable, and it told us that he stood up in some of those big games as well. What's handy is that his floor is okay. It's, reasonably solid for a middle forward. So he's unlikely to really ruin a week. He might get a mid 40 and someone else you are going to play, might get a low 50. So it's only like a 7 to 10 point swing, but he's shown us that his upside is pretty big with his ability to break tackles, in comparison to blokes like Haas and Terrell May. Better than Isaiah Yeo, better than a number of other middle forwards who get through a little bit more work than him or on the field a little bit longer. But he just reminded us all that he is capable of a pretty big performance, and he's certainly going to be under the radar as a bit of a pod as well. Provided his minutes remain consistent, I'm going to picture him as a bit of a dependable mid, particularly in some of those smaller slates during prime time or, through the origin period if he doesn't get his sky blue jersey back. So Stefano, I reckon everyone listening, keep him in the back of your mind as a potential pod, someone with a lot of upside. I just know he's going to have one of those big scores early where he gets 8 tackle breaks, and then everyone's going to be wanting to buy his cards or play him the following week, and he won't repeat it week in, week out. Can you pick the match where it's going to happen? I'm not sure, but I think he's someone that does present a little bit of upside, and he certainly showed a bit of that at the back end last year.
Yeah, you touched on 2 games there for Stefano, the 2 big games that he had with the 10-plus tackle breaks. That was against the Eels, round 22. He scored 81.8 GDS points in that game. And then against the Bulldogs in the first finals game, which, as you said, isn't recorded on GDS scores, he scored 95.7, which is just unheard of unless your name is Payne Haas for a middle forward. That is some unreal stats. And I think, definitely, if that's the sort of thing that we're going to see from Stefano, maybe not week in, week out, because that's definitely not the case that happened last season. He sort of had a big game and followed it up with 2 middle mediocre games, and then went back to another big game in the back end there. But if we can get that matchup right and we can pick it when he does have those 8 to 10 tackle breaks, I think you're going to be absolutely laughing. So I think it's a great pick, and you're right, it's a pod, but now that you've said it, everyone's going to have him in the back of their mind now, unfortunately.
That's right, mate. We love spreading the good news. Mate, I don't know how it happened, but the clock's ticked over an hour and we only had 3 teams to get through tonight. We just love that hour mark, don't we? Regardless of how many games we preview or how many teams we preview. It's all a little bit too much, but this is what everyone's here for. We've done the team previews. People want to see a pack opening. They want to see what players are going into the player pool that they can get their hands on toward the end of the team previews. So Dyl, in a moment, is going to open up a pack, and he'll talk you through about a little bit more about how that's going to work. But obviously, we've gone through the Titans, the Seagulls, and the Melbourne Storm tonight. So if any of those players are pulled in the pack, they're going to be added to the player pool. But so are the 4 teams that we previewed last team preview as well. So not just Titans, Seagulls, or Storm players. If we pack a Bronco, a Bulldog, a Raider, or a Shark, they're all going to go into that giveaway little pool. And that's going to build up pretty quickly because there's going to be more and more players going into that pool each and every episode. So to enter that giveaway and have a chance at winning plenty of those player cards, simply subscribe to the Fantasy Bros YouTube page. It's at FantasyBros AU. You'll need to like the video and just comment and tell us who your MVP is going to be for those particular shows, whether it's an MVP from this evening, and you can even go back to last week's preview if you haven't yet commented and let us know who an MVP is going to be from one of those teams as well. So you can have plenty of entries in that giveaway by the end of our preseason team preview shows. And all winners, they're going to be drawn in our first live round preview show. That'll be on the 4th of March before the season commences. So, Dyl, if I've forgotten anything, add it in, and fingers crossed we can get plenty of handy cards in that giveaway. Over to you.
Said earlier in the show, we've got some Unreal cards already in there, including a Diamond Adam Fanua-Blake, who will definitely become a decent player, particularly in your middles this season. Alrighty, let's jump into it. So we've got a unique 9-player pack here. Once again, let's hope for something big today. Same thing I think happened last time. It was slow to load and we got some Unreal cards. So here we go. All right, kicking us off, we've got a KO Weeks, go straight plat, Sean Kepi plat. We've got Jay Walsh plat. That's not the Jay Walsh that we spoke about today, though. We have Liatau, Matty Nicholson from the Raiders. That'll go into the player pool giveaway. We've got Strange. I'll leave the diamond there. We've got an Edgar from the Panthers. Plat Hiroti, so he'll go into the giveaway pool as well. And then our diamond is Linane from the Warriors. So a couple of decent plats in there. So KO Weeks, Ethan Strange, Matty Nicholson, and Hiroti are all going into the player pool giveaway. As Stu said, just make sure you jump on, like, and subscribe to the Fantasy Bros YouTube channel, like this video, and comment your MVP. Again, not Stu or I, but the MVP player for this season.
Yeah, I'm glad you had to clarify that, just in case anyone wanted to choose us as their show MVP. Righto, that's it for team preview number 2. 7 teams now down, 3 team previews to go. We'll cover 3 or 4 teams through each of those previews. Next up will be the Knights, the Warriors, the Cowboys, and the Eels. Plenty of game day squad relevance to talk about there. Dyl, any indication of when we might be getting that podcast out for listeners who are eagerly awaiting those uploads that are going to be a little bit more frequent over the coming weeks leading up to the preseason, leading up to the kickoff for round 1?
Yeah, definitely. So Rugby League is going to be dropping every Tuesday and Thursday. We've also got our AFL counterparts in Haz and Pity who are doing their team previews, and they drop every Monday and Wednesday. So make sure you check them out. Check us out at YouTube, Apple and Spotify. On the YouTube, really easy. We've got the playlists there. So if you do want to just filter out the AFL, I don't know why you would, but if you do, you can just jump across to the Rugby League playlist there as well. Also, we've been teasing it. We continue to tease it. We are probably a week, maybe 2 weeks at most away from the Fantasy Bros textbook releasing. That is both for AFL and Rugby League as well. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be posting plenty, and that'll be over on our website. So go and check out our website now, www.fantasybrosau.com, so that you can make sure you are ready to go when those textbooks are released.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much, Dyl. Plenty of insight there into 3 pretty fantasy relevant teams. Thanks for joining us, everyone, once again, and we'll catch you next time. See ya.
Peace. See you, man. Thanks for tuning in to another episode by the Fantasy Bros. If you want to show your support, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this show on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. Also, make sure you check us out on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Just search @FantasyBros AU.